Shanghai Disneyland is open. We just completed our second day of operation. The verdict is still out on whether or not it's a success or it's working. Still way too early to tell. But what I want to talk to you guys about today, in a little bit more of a conversational method. I don't have a written script or anything like that, so I've got some notes, but I just kind of want to hang out and chat with you guys a bit on some of the things, subsequent dominoes that may be following soon. We've already heard recently, for example, that Disney Springs at Walt Disney World is set to reopen. They're going to reopen on May 20th, which is just, a little over a week from now. And that's like the next step, I would think, here in the States at least. It's kind of good news, but not as good as it sounds. For one thing, from what I understand, Disney's not opening up any of their locations in Disney Springs. It's only third-party restaurants and shops that are going to be reopened. So Disney hasn't decided to do anything yet. But still, it's a start. And I think if it goes well, if they let these shops open and they see how they do, then Disney will follow suit. And we could even kind of extrapolate a little bit from how things went in China, assuming that we follow a similar path with respect to the stats. Disneytown in Shanghai opened on March 9th. That was 2 months ago. A little over 2 months ago. So can we then kind of say, well, if it's 2 months for Shanghai, could we expect to see Magic Kingdom open up in July? Maybe. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not sure if you could draw a one-for-one comparison, but at least it gives us a benchmark, because I think that there's a rush now. Once something has opened, I think that for some of us, there may be this want to start knocking things out one after the other. This is open and this is open and this is open, but I think it's going to be a couple months for them to feel that out. So we already heard, by the way, that Disney's not taking any reservations until July 1st. So we know it won't be before that, at least. But don't take that July 1st date to mean anything specifically, because they had previously were taking reservations for June 1st. That doesn't, all that stuff, anything that was booked between June and July has now been canceled or wiped out. So they could just as easily do the same in July when that time comes. Now, the one thing that gives me, I don't know, pause, but maybe it shouldn't. I vacillate constantly on where I stand in this situation. Originally, I was full of fear, and I just thought that they should just shut everything down until we're good and ready. But I've come to realize that there is no ready. That this thing is just going to go and go and go. Some of the stuff that I read that makes a lot of sense is just this is just going to become part of our lives. Now we could do things to sort of mitigate that we can still practice, good social distancing and be safe and cautious. But let's go ahead and dip our toes in that water a little bit. Now here's what's interesting, because sometimes we live in this focused bubble of Disney. I'm talking about you and I. We're kind of a Disney-centric, but there's some news coming out of more things starting to, trend toward reopening, the world again. You may or may not have heard of Efteling, which is a theme park in the Netherlands, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place. It's inspiring. It's gorgeous. It's well done. It's everything you want a theme park to be. It's pretty much the Disneyland of the Netherlands. That's kind of there's only the one theme park as far as I know, but anyway, it's beautiful. It's very nice, and they're talking about reopening. Well, not talking about. They've announced they're going to begin a phased reopening, just like Disney's doing at Shanghai. A phased reopening on May 20th, and it's going to be the usual stuff. In terms of getting ready, social distancing. Where, by the way, I read in their announcement it's going to be a meter and a half. Whereas I heard the VP of operations at Shanghai, when he was doing his little walkthrough, he was talking about a meter. So they're doing a meter and a half. I'm not sure if that half meter or whatever that equates to in feet makes that much difference, but that's what they're doing. They're doing a meter and a half of social distancing. I'm assuming in queues and in those little, boxes that they create for seats for live shows, that kind of thing. A meter and a half there. Constant cleaning in high touch areas, door handles, things like that. And then they're also going to be doing reservations only, like Shanghai, which I can't imagine anybody else doing anything differently for the short term, at least. So Efteling is opening or doing a phased reopen on May 20th. Also, Europa Park in Germany is doing the same thing. They're reopening on May 29th. Almost the same exact thing. Phased reopening, and then all the, cleaning, social distance, that kind of thing. Reservations. So it's not, it started, I don't know if they were waiting to see how Shanghai went. It's funny because just last week I thought there's no way Disney's going to take the lead on this. There's no way Disney's going to be the guinea pig, and it almost feels like that's just what they're doing. This reopening of Shanghai does appear to be some kind of benchmark for other theme parks to open their doors. Now we haven't heard anything from Knott's, which is interesting. They still haven't announced any kind of phased reopening. But you've got now Netherlands and Germany are a little more progressive, I would think, in terms of that. So maybe that's one of the reasons why they're doing that. So who knows? But one more place that you can take a cue from, and I actually thought in my mind this was going to be the first thing, and maybe in some ways it is, sports. I thought sports would go first, and then Disney would follow. They would follow sports lead. That we would see, for example, the NFL. It's interesting. I'm waiting for an announcement from the NFL on what they're going to be doing. But the reason why we haven't had an announcement from the NFL is because they haven't actually closed anything. The NFL did not cancel anything. They have been proceeding all this time as if they're going to open right on time. They're going to have training camps. They've already had their draft. They've set up their schedule. They're acting as if everything's fine. There's not going to be any interruptions in their schedule, which is probably, logical considering they're more of a fall winter sport. But I do wonder about crowds. I wonder if they're going to have crowds in the NFL games. But I mentioned sports because we got confirmation. Major League Baseball has approved. I mean, this is legit. This is real. They've approved. They have a plan, an actual plan, not just, oh, hey, what if we played all the games in Phoenix? That'll be fun. We'll just put everybody up at a hotel at the sports complex in Arizona where they do the spring training. We'll just put everybody up there and play the whole season in Arizona. And everybody thought that was adorable. So we hadn't heard anything. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, just the other day, they have approved a plan for a 82-game schedule, which is basically half of their season. An 82-game schedule that will start in July. And then they'll have a modified postseason where normally they would have, I don't remember how many teams were in the postseason under normal conditions, but they're going to have 14 teams in the postseason, which is more, I think, because they play, there's the wild card, there's 6. Was it 5 or 6? I think, no, it's 5 in each league. I don't know, guys. It's been a minute. Okay, so I think it was 10 teams total in the playoffs. They're going to up that to 14, which would make the playoffs significantly longer, obviously. But anyway, I digress. They've got a plan for an 82-game schedule. They're going to keep the teams local in their same time zones to reduce the amount of travel. They're going to play games in neutral stadiums if needed for those teams that are in states that have more strict guidelines from the state in terms of what they can reopen. I'm not sure which states those are, but it is interesting. That's one of the hang-ups that sports leagues are having, is that the NBA or the NFL or Major League Baseball, they can't just go out and say we're going to start playing baseball again, because these teams operate within a state's jurisdiction under state law. So if one state has a different set of guidelines or mandates than another, that team can't. For example, the Lakers in the NBA can't have any kind of training. They haven't opened up their practice facilities because the state won't let them. But other teams in other states have already opened up or can open up their training facilities because they don't have the same limitations. It's an interesting conversation. It's an interesting thing to try to negotiate, and it makes you wonder if teams will just ship out, to other, like they're doing with baseball and playing in a neutral stadium, maybe at a minor league park or something like that. So for the first I don't know for how long, but initially there will be no fans at the baseball games either. And again, I think that I feel like that's something that we're going to have to get used to, and it may or may not change the way we perceive sports long term. Hopefully that isn't the case, but get used to that kind of idea. Get used to that possibly happening. Meanwhile, the UFC has already started their, I don't know if they call it a season. They just had a match last weekend. Now, UFC has their own private island and they can just hold matches wherever they want. But one thing that I do know from UFC is that they tested everybody. They tested everybody every day, and not the fighters, the training staff, the maintenance facility crew, the media, anybody who was on that private island got a test every day. And that's going to be something that they're going to have to do, I think, for Major League Baseball too. And it's something that's actually going to become part of a reality going forward. It sounds like getting tested is easier than it used to be. Then you could just with a cotton swab and you can know. Can you know the same day? If they're testing every day, that means you get a result that day. I wonder how long. I wonder how long that wait is. Is it minutes, hours? Can they do it on the spot? Because that's something that you might see in the future going to a Disney park. If they want to get to a point where they allow more than 25 or 30% of their capacity, if they want to start letting in 50 or 60 or 80% of the people, that may require testing people. Ooh, Nilly. Oh, can you imagine testing 40,000 people a day? Wow. But that's the way it has to be, right? The only way to really feel good about where we are is if we know whether or not we're sick. And I mean, obviously we can individually go out and do our own thing. We can go to the grocery store, we can go to the park, we can go to a restaurant and not expect to be tested. What I'm talking about in terms of knowing is comfort levels in going to a theme park or a sporting event. Is that possible? Can they get the technology to a place where they can test people on the spot before you go into a theme park? That would be interesting. But anyway, so there's that. There's the UFC. Now, one thing I forgot, talking about dominoes falling, nobody even registered. But did you know? Well, I would say that UFC was first. I guess UFC would be first. They just had the match. But I was thinking that the PGA Tour might be the first professional league to start up activities again, because they had announced a month ago that they were going to restart the tour in June. Was it June? Yes, mid-June in Texas. They've already got a schedule worked out. They've got events planned already starting in mid-June in Texas. No crowds for the first 4 events. Now I'm assuming, again, just like the UFC, they're going to be able to test everybody, all the facilities, the media, the camera crews and all that stuff, all that. But they're going to start in June, and then they've got, the Masters. They're going to hold the Masters in November. That's wild. U.S. Open in September. They already canceled the British Open, so we don't have to worry about that. And I'm just saying all this because I feel like things, again, all these things added up together is an acceleration of getting things going again. And I don't care what, you can go back 100 years to the Spanish flu, and I've heard people talk about this in interviews on sports radio and things like that. People need sports. It's always been true. Even 100 years ago, there was a huge, cry, outpouring of support to start up football back then. And you can see photos. There are images of people going in baseball games and football games of people wearing masks. There's an image that I found of a baseball player wearing a mask while playing during the Spanish flu. So there's precedent for this. There's precedent for sports and now in our terms, or in our modern era, theme parks taking the lead and being the ones to say, hey, I know you guys need this, so we're going to put this out there for you. Dave Grohl, just yesterday, I think it was, put out an article about live music being one of the things that can bring us out of this. And I have to agree. I know it sounds risky and scary and all that and all this, not being, the social distancing and that kind of thing. We're just gonna have to get through it. We're just gonna have to. Because there's no finish line. Okay, there's no finish line. There is no date where they're gonna say it's not a thing anymore. At least that's just the way I see it. That's the place that I've come to in my mind, that we might as well start reopening things a little bit. I mean, not in a hurry, and I'm willing to do what I have to do, and I'm willing to do better than I've done. And I know what you're going to say. We're talking about that whole Knott's Berry Farm thing. I've said already, I'm fine that we went out and did it. I'm fine that it happened, but we could have done better. We could have been a little bit more cautious. It's going to be a learning process for everybody, but I do think that it's very important for our own well-being, our own mental stability, and the economy too, for that matter, that we do start to reopen these things. We do start going to theme parks again. We do start going to movies again. We do start going to sporting events and live concerts. Now let's get back to Disney Springs opening. We're gonna sort of wrap up with that, I guess. I think it's great. I think it's great that they got a plan for May 20th. I know personally that there have been many instances in my days that I wished that Downtown Disney were open. I'm not even a big fan of Downtown Disney, to be honest, but there are days that I would very much like to be able to just drive down there, park my car, walk through Downtown Disney, get something to eat, maybe do a little shopping. Maybe they open World of Disney, just, oh my God, what I wouldn't give right now just to be able to look and feel some of that Disney energy. And there's ways to do it, obviously. I mean, we've been going to grocery stores and, Targets and Stater Brothers and all that stuff, whatever you have where you are, the Piggly Wiggly or the Publix. I don't know what they're called anywhere, but I'm a California boy, so that's all I know. But we can do it. We've been doing it. We know how to do it. It is up to us in that sense. So I'm very grateful that Disney Springs is opening for you guests out there in Florida, and hopefully soon Disney World, because we're supposed to be in phase 2 here in Disneyland. Now we haven't heard anything from Disney on Downtown Disney, so I'm not sure where we're at. But restrictions have been relaxed a little bit here in California, and I'm hoping that'll be the case soon, that we will be able to do that. It means so much. It really does. It means a lot. I can't wait. I can't wait for Downtown Disney to open. So what do you guys think about that? What do you guys think? Oh, are you finding any comfort in seeing, hearing this news that, Shanghai is open, that Disney Springs is going to open, that we're going to see some golf here pretty soon, maybe some baseball in July, that the NFL is acting as if it's business as usual? Does that give you any kind of comfort at all, or does it make you afraid? And I know that there's a wide spectrum of feelings in there, and all of them are valid. They're all worthwhile and worthy to talk about. So let us know about that. And I'm going to leave you with this question. In our next installment of this little this is a different format, as I mentioned, just kind of talking to the camera like this, as opposed to doing a scripted show, kind of like a radio show, I suppose, that you can see. But I want to, for our next installment, I'm going to be doing a bit on entering Disneyland. I want to get away from talking about coronavirus and COVID-19 all day. I want to do something that's just strictly Disney. And hopefully that will be enjoyable. But when you enter Disneyland, that's what I want to talk about is what are your feelings? Where does your day begin? When does your Disneyland day begin? For example, does it begin when you're on the tram, going through the gate, town square, that kind of thing? Where do you feel like your day has started when you enter Disneyland? Ponder that, Fresh Baked. Leave us a comment, and I'll try to address some of those comments that I hear from you guys. I'll mention a few of those in the next video. And then if you have any questions about what we just talked about, Disney Springs reopening, Shanghai reopening, or sporting events, that kind of thing, ask that question in the comments below, and I'll try to address a few of those as well in the next installment. And until then, thanks guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Hit that notification button. And then you can follow us on Twitter at FreshBakedDizzy, that's fresh with no E, and on Instagram at _FreshBaked. We'll see you next time, guys. I love you guys. Fresh bite.